Spirit has a funny way of moving through us. Um, one minute you're dead asleep, the next minute you are wide awake and it's 2:22 in the morning and you're frustrated because you want to go back to sleep. And then a song by Saint Finnegan pops into your head, and the lyrics to that song are, "When Spirit says jump, I say how high." And you just can't ignore that. And it's like, do I really am I really getting out of bed right now to record a podcast episode? And Spirit says yes, and Spirit has jokes. So here we are in the middle of the night recording an episode with a raspy, tired voice, ready to talk about grieving a living parent. So let's get into it. Does anybody else out there have a parent who is physically here in this earthly realm, but is mentally and emotionally unavailable? Yeah, me too. So we're going to talk about it. And one of the hardest and most greatest decisions anyone can ever do in their life is go no contact with one or both of their parents. And most people in society aren't going to understand that in the slightest. It's kind of like you had to be there kind of thing. So there's grief around that. And it falls into the category of ambiguous grief and disenfranchised grief. And ambiguous grief is really someone who is physically here but mentally and emotionally not present. And you're grieving the parent or parents that you wish you had. And then the people in our lives say things like, "Oh, but they did their best and at least they're still here." Okay, Barbara, I don't need your platitudes of trying to find the silver lining in my experience. So now we're looking at disenfranchised grief because it's a kind of loss that's not widely known or understood by society. And they don't understand the fact that you have a parent who is physically here, but you're grieving them because in your life, in your mind, in your experience, your very valid experience, they're not there, just as if they were dead. Yes, don't get me wrong. People mean well when they tell us these things, but they just don't get it. And until it's been a lived it, breathed it, experienced it type of situation, they're just not going to understand to the capacity at which we kind of would like for them to understand. And I speak to this from firsthand experience, not once, but twice in my life. Grieving the loss of a living parent cuts to a depth most people turn their heads at in complete confusion when you explain to them your parent is still alive, but you're no contact. And then that's when we get to exercise our boundaries and use our voice by letting people know, like, you don't expect them to understand, yet you expect them to be supportive of your decision, even if it doesn't make sense. And the right ones in your life will hear you and be there. I have a very, very special, unique, kind, loving friend named KT. She has been such a huge support for me in the most painful transitions in my life in such a short amount of time of knowing her. And one of them is, my decision to go no contact with my mom for the second time in my life. She hasn't experienced what I'm going through yet without cue, without any kind of prompting. She sympathizes with me and even went to the extent of looking into how to be a supportive person in this kind of situation. And I don't know about you guys, but I hope you have at least one person in your life like that. And she's just a real one. And I thank God every single day for aligning our paths for each of us to be in each other's lives. So, a little backstory of my relationship with my mom. Growing up, she was my best friend. We did everything together. She was there at my gymnastics practices and taking me all over the state of Florida for gymnastics competitions and cheerleading and picking us up from the skating rink after an all-night skate night and picking us up from the movies and Easy Street and all these, places that me and my friends would go. And, while I'm really, really grateful for that, there were things happening in the background that just led into this destruction of whatever kind of mess. So, we moved out of my dad's house when I was 9 or 10. I don't really remember. And we moved in with my grandparents. And that's really around the time when I started to feel like I didn't matter, and I didn't really understand why she was hardly ever home, and that my grandmother was the one primarily taking care of me. And I was going to my friends' houses, and, they were coming over to my grandparents. And it just, I look at it, and I've always said that my mom was going through her second childhood. She was actually getting to live her life because she did have me at such a young age. She didn't get to do these things. She didn't get to go out and party and, all the things that teenagers and young adults get to do. And at the same time, that doesn't negate how I was feeling at that time. I felt like I didn't have any kind of support. I felt completely misunderstood and just really by myself. And so we moved out of my grandparents' house into a house next door to them. And that's really when life took a nosedive into a direction that just was not conducive for somebody my age to be witnessing. And I started to realize the shift even more of feeling like I wasn't a priority in my mom's life. And, she would have parties, and there would be weird, random people coming in and out of the house at all hours of the night. And I remember one time I came home from a friend's house, and there was people laid out all over the floor on the couch. And I was in my room, and I noticed a open condom wrapper under my bed. And the level of disrespect I felt, and just disappointment in my mom that she would actually allow people to sleep in my room, let alone have sex in her 13-year-old daughter's bed. I may have been 12 at the time, 12 or 13. But either way, you don't do that. And she would have parties and people over on school nights. And I would tell her, like, hey, I need you to be quiet. I have school in the morning, or I'm trying to do homework. And there was one specific night where she had people over, and they were loud, and there was music and just cutting up. And I was telling him, like, I have school in the morning. Please, can you be quiet? And nothing changed. Nobody was quiet. My mom didn't stop it. So I went outside and slept on my trampoline all night. I ran my alarm clock through the side window of the house so that it would reach the trampoline so that I could get some kind of sleep and wake up and be able to go to school in the morning. And that continued. It was that level of disrespect, of complete disregard of her child. And over time, that set the stage of I'm not really wanted here. And I would stay at my friend's house a lot, whether it was a school night or the weekend. I noticed I would rotate between a set of friends and basically couch surf because I did not want to be at home. I enjoyed school so much because it got me out of my house, my very toxic house. And my mom never had the best taste in men. And she met this guy who completely flipped our lives upside down. It was to the point where I would need to sleep with my door locked because I feared being in that house with him. And he was addicted to pills and drugs and just not a safe person, emotionally, physically, verbally abusive to my mother. And I watched her just take it. And there was an incident that happened that, caused him to go to jail. And she would tell me, I'm done with him. We broke up. That the whole thing. And I specifically remember telling her, if he comes back into this house, I'm leaving. And I don't think it registered to my mom how serious I was, because not long afterwards, he was back in the house. And I started packing up my room. And my mom was so oblivious to the situation and in her own world that she didn't realize I was bringing boxes home from work at the same job we worked at. So here I am in high school packing up my room, and it wasn't until the day my dad showed up with his truck that she realized what was happening. And I walked out with boxes in my hand, and she had tear-filled eyes, and I looked at her and I told her, I told you, if he comes back, I'm leaving. It was either him or me, and it's very clear that he is more important than having me here, so I am leaving. And I left. And she didn't stop me. And I knew there was nothing I could do to make her want to change. I knew she had to want that for herself. She had to do that for herself. She had to get off the drugs for herself, leave the toxic relationship for herself. Me leaving wasn't enough. Her almost losing her house wasn't enough. The amount of car repossessions weren't enough for her to want to change. So I left. And moving forward, she still struggled with her drug addictions, and she only reached out when she needed something or to tell me what was going on with her health. And moving into my young adult years, there were many conversations with her about what I needed. And what I needed was for her to be a mom, for her to reach out to me, not because she needed something, for her to reach out to me to genuinely see how I'm doing, to shoot the shit, to just talk or, whatever. And she didn't have the capacity to do that. And when I would have these conversations with her, she would play the victim instead of taking responsibility. I was such a bad mother. I did the best I could. And yes, our parents may have done the best they could with what they had, yet that still does not call for abusive behavior. And the older I got and, started doing my healing, I realized I was a parentified child where my whole life I was the mother and she was the child. And that role, that dynamic isn't conducive. It's not healthy. And so that's when we realize, like, I need to completely disengage from this. And going back to when I moved out of my house, I didn't talk to her for several years, almost a decade, maybe a little over, because I just watched her from the scenes, from the background of her life just completely in shambles, and there was nothing I could do about it. It absolutely broke my heart watching her life just crumble because of drug addiction and not wanting to get better, not knowing when I was going to get that call of your mother overdosed or, she died. It just, I was, even though I was not talking to her, I was still worried and in this constant, just what the fuck kind of state, grieving the parent that I wish I had, watching other people have these parents and these loving relationships, and watching girls go out to lunch with their mom and having these mom-daughter dates. And it's just like, what the fuck? Where did I get the short end of the straw? And feeling that resentment and bitterness and just overall sick feeling in the stomach of just, this isn't fair. So this life experience gave me a different perspective on, why people go no contact with their parents. There's reason behind that. And when I became a nurse, I learned that there's this stigma around children going no contact with their parents or not being in their parents' life. And we would get patients where, the adult children were barely there, or they didn't come and visit, or it was just like very nonchalant type of care, like they could care less or like didn't really have an opinion on their parent being in the hospital. And there was this one situation where a nurse didn't really understand why our patients' children weren't coming to see them and they were really sick in the ICU and this and that, and that's their parent, and really just bad mouthing the children and blaming the children, and just had this whole opinion about it. And I asked her, what did the parent do for the child to not want to speak to them? And she looked at me like I had five heads. She clearly didn't understand. She's like, but that's their parent. And I said, people go through things with their parents that a lot of us aren't going to understand. And there's reason to why they don't want to be in their parents' life. And I could tell she didn't come from that kind of lifestyle. And really, it's when children choose that, it's a last resort. And we don't want to make that decision. We have to make that decision to protect our peace. And a lot of us, myself included, often question if we even made the right decision. This isn't an overnight process. This was a decision in the making over X amount of years. Years of emotional abuse, manipulation, being dismissed, failed attempts at repairing the relationship and having our boundaries crossed. And, we feel guilty over and over and over again. And there's this societal pressure, and, there's fear of judgment and guilt and grief for making a healthy decision for ourselves. And, there's no shame in choosing peace when you know nothing will change until they stop playing the victim and start taking responsibility for their actions. And when I tell people my story, they're like, but she's your mom. A bullshit. Family doesn't excuse toxic behavior. Yes, she gave birth to me, and I'm grateful she gave me life. And there comes a time when we realize our parents are on their own journey. They're their own being in this life just as we are. And they have their own traumas and they have their own karma to clear. And it's not our responsibility to do that for them. They have to want that for themselves. And there was a time in my mom's life where she did get off drugs, and she became healthy and our relationship started to repair. But then she started to slip back into her old patterns, and she started going back to the bar and working at the bar and meeting toxic men. And she met this guy who was 20 times worse than the guy she was with when I was in high school. And that devastated me just all over again. And while she stayed clean off of drugs, it was still the toxic men that ruined her. I watched her give her power away over and over and over again, and completely dismiss me and push me in the corner. And again, only reached out when she needed something. And there was a time where she came and lived in my apartment while I was out on a travel assignment, and not knowing, like, is this man going to kill my mom? Because it was that toxic. And for those who don't have that type of relationship or any kind of experience like that, when your parent is in an abusive relationship, you, again, don't know if you're going to get that call, hey, is this so and so? Your mother's been murdered. And with her putting herself in those situations, I had to start distancing myself, because I was not about to go through that again. I had better tools to be better equipped with what was happening. And even though I had those tools, it was the times when she would reach out and my wounded inner child would get excited of, like, is this the time? Did she change? Like, will she be changed? And the devastation that kept flooding my body over and over, that feeling of my inner child's heart break all over again. Like, I couldn't keep having that happen. And, my dogs, when they died, that was the tipping point for this second time of going no contact. When Kane was passing, I was calling my mom throughout the day, trying to get a hold of her. And granted, she was in the hospital and she's had several health issues for her entire life. And I can have compassion for that. And being so exhausted and in my own experience and not being able to give my energy to anything. I finally got a hold of her 30 minutes before the vet was going to be there to assist Kane, and I told her what was happening, and she cried and I was crying. And in that same conversation, shortly after, it went straight to, well, I'm in the hospital and this and that and me, 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 me. And that's not the type of energy I wanted to be in when I was preparing for my soul dog to die. I got off the phone with her, and the next day there was a brief message of asking how I was doing. And I told her, and the next text was telling me about herself again. And I just let it be at what it was going to be. And didn't hear back from her at all. I had 2 missed calls from her. The first one I called back, and she said it was a butt dial. And I was like, okay. She goes, but since we're here, how are you doing? I was like, I'm fine. And it was a very vague conversation. A couple days later, maybe a week or so later, I don't know, time didn't exist at that time in my life, I called her back, and she wasn't really saying much. And I was like, did you need anything when you called? And she responded, you called me. I said, no, I'm returning your call because I have a missed call from you. Did you need anything? And she said, no. And we got off the phone. And those 2 instances, when I'm in the worst time of my life, the worst depression I have ever felt, the worst sadness, the worst heartbreak I've ever felt in my life, she was not there for me. And it brought back all of the memories of all the time from the time I was a teenager into my adulthood where I needed my mom and she fucking wasn't there. She would tell me throughout my entire life, oh, you were so strong. You didn't need me. You could take care of yourself. That's not a fucking flex. That is emotional abuse. And then there was a time where she texted me saying, how's it going? I hope things are going better for you. Oh my God, I think about you constantly. I love you so much. It hurts. It hurts me knowing how bad you're feeling and doing. And there's nothing I can do about it other than pray. And then the next message was, well, I'm still at the hospital. Nowhere in that, her reaching out to me was just for me to learn about her and for her to talk about her and for her to say there's nothing she can do than pray. There is so much more a parent can do when their child is going through the worst time of their fucking life. And that broke me. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, with me knowing I have to do this again for the second time in my fucking life. And I don't want to do this. And I knew she was having a surgery from what my grandfather told me. And I waited until after her surgery to call her to have this conversation again. And my voice was shaking when I called her, and I almost didn't call her because it's like, oh, well, she's in the hospital and, she just had the surgery. And I was thinking so much about her feelings and putting my feelings on the back burner. And there was this voice inside of me that was like, we're done fucking doing that. So I mustered up the courage and I called her, shaking voice, and I told her, I don't think you're going to like this conversation, but it needs to be had. And so I told her, I need to go no contact with you. I can't keep taking this over and over. You weren't there for me with the dogs. And I could barely get any of this out. And she reacted the same way. I knew she would. She starts going off in this excuse and that excuse, and I'm this, and you don't think I'm not in a bad position, and just like, again, playing the victim and not taking responsibility of, I'm sorry my actions hurt you. That probably would have been enough for me to not go no contact with her. But the fact that she just kept yelling and trying to make excuses, I couldn't do it. I was like, I got to get off the phone. And I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, and she called back and left this message that I didn't listen to because I didn't want that energy. I knew how it was going to be. So I skimmed over the transcript, and the very last thing she said to me was, "You're pathetic." And that was enough validation for me to know that I made the right decision. And, I thought I blocked her number, and somehow a text came through, I don't know, maybe a month or so afterwards, that completely invalidated me. And it was along the lines of saying, she couldn't stand not like me not wanting to talk to her and to stop this craziness. And then proceeded to tell me about her again. And it was just this reaching and reaching and reaching. And it's just like, not once was there an apology. It's just like, this is crazy. You're crazy. And it made me wonder how many times in my life growing up as a child, I was invalidated and made to feel that way. Instead of being given love and nurturing and just that motherly presence. And that, stirs up grief of like just the realization that I'm never going to have a mom. And that was over and over and over throughout my entire life, where I would go through these cycles and periods of coming to that realization that I'm never going to have a mom. Like, she's never going to have the capacity to be the person I need her to be. And it took a very, very long time of realizing that just like everything in life is a paradox, we get to, or it gets to be this and that. And so we can have compassion for our parents and their childhood experiences while simultaneously choosing to prioritize our own peace by going no contact, or whatever it looks like for us to keep our peace. And you can still have love in your heart for them and not be present or active in their life, nor have them in yours. We're allowed to feel grateful and wish things were different. And adults who have gone no contact often grieve the parents they wish they had. And there's this certain kind of longing we feel with this deep heartache, knowing our parents will never be what we needed them to be. And more often than not, that cycle of longing and surrender repeats until we decide what's best for us. And sometimes even after we've accepted the situation, it circles back around. Yet this time we have better tools and better boundaries to prevent us from collapsing into it. And, accepting that that's who they are, and letting go of the hope that they'll eventually change or even apologize is incredibly painful, especially when there's an apology with no action. And that, my friends, is manipulation. So we hold on to this hope for a future while radically accepting the relationship will never change. And that was tough for me. That gut seeking feeling that I'm never going to have that mom. And this last time, I feel like I was able to ease into it just a little more, because in my heart, I knew I was making the right decision. In my heart, I knew I was choosing love for myself. So if anyone is out here listening that has a similar situation, and not necessarily the circumstances are the same, but you're grieving a parent who is still very much so alive and actively choosing to not change, while we're over here just, kind of in the background. And it's real. Your anger is real. Your sadness is real. The what the fuck is real. Just the infuriation of like, you just want to fucking shake them sometimes. And it's just like, why won't you fucking change? So when you're feeling like this and you're making this decision, know you're not giving up on them, and know you're not abandoning your parents or your parent. And, in my opinion, they are the parent. And it's now time for them to step up, for them to repair the relationship. Because again, you've exhausted all of your options and you're finally choosing your peace over the chaos. And, fuck what society says. If you want to go no contact, do it. If you've been on the fence about it and questioning it, weigh out your pros and cons and do a trial period. Check in with how you feel without their presence. Check in with how your nervous system feels without that ping on the phone and your nervous system jolts of, oh God, like our nervous system shouldn't be feeling like that when our parents reach out to us. And, will going no contact solve all your problems? No, but it will definitely detach you from the environment that wounded you so you can adequately heal. And no, I'm not a therapist, nor am I telling you what to do. This is simply me sharing my story as, I know several other people in a situation where they are no contact with their parents. And, what I do know is that I can support people in navigating through the grief that comes with this. And, I give people permission to feel all the things, even if society is saying otherwise. And, you're allowed to make this decision and then not miss them at all. Society doesn't like when we say that things. And I personally, I don't miss feeling like I was never good enough. I don't miss the, reaching out to me just because she needed something. I don't miss the criticism. I don't miss the verbal and emotional abuse. I don't miss that. And I hope this episode spoke to some of you, whether you've already made this decision or you're, contemplating on making this very scary decision. I hope that it's giving you the courage to be able to move forward and not feel so alone in this situation. And because I know the influence of society can detour us from making the decision that's ultimately the best decision that we actually need to make. So, as always, thank you guys for listening. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss another episode. And, make sure you're liking, commenting, sharing, saving, doing all the things that keeps us alive. And if you're curious about how I can support you in grief, reach out to me. There's going to be some links below so that you can do that. Follow me on Instagram. Do all the things if you want to reach out just to have a simple conversation and you have questions. I'm available for that too. And as always, thank you guys, and I'll see you on the next episode.